evening. Good evening. We are going to welcome first on our evening session. We are having a Q&A, an interesting conversation today. We are going to be having it with the visionary behind Sandton AoG, which is Apostle John Ngcebetsha. But before, we are just waiting for just more people, just for you brethren to come on in. So I do advise that you just sit there at home and just relax. Get yourself a cup of coffee as other members are just coming in on board so that we can be able to just have that frank conversation. So the structure of the conversation that we are going to have is just not going to be me in conversation with Apostle John Ngcebetsha, but it is also going to be you. So I do encourage, do participate there online as we are going to be having this discussion. So we are live on YouTube. Please do share the link with friends, share the link with other church members, share the link with the body of Christ as a whole, because this past Saturday we were celebrating 10 years of existence, 10 years of God's grace, 10 years of challenges. So it has been a lot. You would understand that those of you who have been following us for quite some time, we had our seasons of ups and downs. As I am sitting right now, I'm sitting at 8 Malindi Road. We didn't start here at 8 Malindi Road. We started at the Blue Church. There was a building, one Kumbi. It was the Blue Church. There was an explosive revival there. We were joined by the great preachers of the word, including the late Miles Monroe and all of the legends in the gospel fraternity, and also amazing preachers. So ever since that revival has started, and when we started to work here in Sandton, damn, it was a lot that we had to deal with. You would understand that at some point there were other people who were writing articles about the church, and there were other people who were just poking holes in as far as who we are, where we stand from. And as you would understand that we started with the brethren from Sandton AoG, so our affiliation it is closely linked with Assemblies of God, Back to God movement. That's where we have started. But in this conversation, the conversation that we are going to have, it is going to be the conversation that we're going to have. It is going to just clarify some of those things. Going to clarify a lot in as far as where are we as an organization. It is going to clarify all of the nuggets as we were in this journey together. So I'm going to be joined right now by the apostle, but I'm seeing you guys are logging in. You are getting in now, so please do comment. Your comments are going to be we are going to consider them. So for instance, right now I'm even viewing I'm here, and I will be seeing your comments. So whatever questions that you may have, please do on the comment section. Just write it. Write your question. Then it will be addressed as we are going on with the conversation. There are a lot of things, however, that we are going to cover, and this we have titled this is an unfamiliar call. The reason why we are calling it an unfamiliar call, we are going to get into it. The apostle is going to just drill down on that. But then now, secondly, in this unfamiliar call, there are different elements that we are going to touch on. That will include his personal life as the leader, and his profession, how he got to where he was just professionally. Then we are going to then do the church stuff, of which I'm quite interested in, because you'd understand that our journey has been characterized by different ailments, and there were controversies along the way. So please do share the link. We are going to start in the next few minutes. We're just waiting just for others to join in. So if you are online and you have joined in, just send your greetings. Do tell us that you are here, and also it's going to be very, very beneficial, because this conversation, it is not just only I, as I have mentioned, but we want you to be part of the conversation. We want you to be part of the chat. So please, if you do have burning questions, please do upload them there on the comment section. And I'm saying this, I cannot stress this enough. This is going to not be a usual kind kind of conversation, or a usual podcasting conversation, as we are going to be touching on also the things that they may have seemed to be hurting, especially to others in the body of Christ. You would understand that after our revival, there were some brethren that we have invited. You would understand that as we were journeying, since we have started to now, the church actually split. So they split with brethren who left, but they've started new work. And then we've also got certain brethren who just who leaked certain stuff of our church using just different online platforms so that they can just have a conversation. And deliberately, as the church, we took a stance then to be silent. Why? Because we were building. I'm almost reminded of Tobias and Sanballat. Do you remember when Jerusalem, the walls had been demolished, and then they went there and they started building. Then there were naysayers along the journey who criticized the work of the Lord and the rebuilding of the walls. So I think we are just going to be starting now. I'm going to be joined by the visionary behind the work, none other but Apostle John Ngcebetsha. Good evening, Apostle. How are you doing, sir?
Let's see if we get this right.
So remember, do post your questions online. As I've said that we are about to start now. If you do have any comment, any question, please do upload it there on the comment section. I am joined by the visionary behind the work, which is Apostle John Ngcebetsha, lawyer by profession, as I understand. But before I also just bulldoze your profile, Apostle, who is John Ngcebetsha?
Good evening, President, and good evening indeed to everyone that is joining us on this occasion. We must start by saying that it can only be the grace of God. It can only be God in His divine nature that intervenes, that we may be able to say we are marking 10 years of His faithfulness and grace. Mm-hmm. We are very humbled. We are very humbled. We have exceeded any expectation that we ourselves had thought we will have, especially if one looks at the totality of all the things that we faced. And we're saying, all glory be to God. We are humbled to have been used as tools by the Lord Jesus Christ, who entrusted us with this work. So I want to start there. Secondly, as many of us that are joining on this candid, uncensored, uncut interview, we will be going into matters that for many years people ask questions about things that we should have probably in their eyes answered at the time, and the Holy Ghost would not allow us. I know many a times that I drafted things that I wanted to say, and the Lord said, no, you're not saying a word. If it's about you, you can write, but if it's about me, shut your mouth, shut your pen. And there's nothing I could do but to shut up. So the Lord has sort of given me the green light to say some things that could be helpful to understand where we come from and where we're going. We have termed it the unfamiliar call.
Yep.
Because it's not a call that anyone in my mind, in my space, would have expected.
Yeah.
So it was bound to face resistance, certainly from me, as it probably faced resistance from others. But God, who qualifies the disqualified, is the one that granted us this favor to participate in the body of Christ.
So, Apostle, as the journey has started, you'd understand that just this weekend, on the 12th of October, we're celebrating the 10 years, a decade of existence, Sandton AoG House of Refuge. Would you maybe just take us through the journey on how and why did you start this work? You are calling it an unfamiliar call, and it has been characterized by different ailments. Most of the things, they were just discrediting the work. Why did you start a church in Sandton? Is it because the richest square mile, or Are there any other reasons? Because there are some monetary benefits, especially in these times when you are starting a church where there's middle class and upper class individuals.
Allow me to perhaps begin with my own history, which was your first question that I didn't answer before I arrive there. I think the build-up will be helpful for the person that follows this interview. I am born in Transkei, born in Umtata. I come from a family that is drawn in a semi-rural area, urbanized with time. The important thing about my background is that my parents were saved by the time I was born. But importantly is that I was born as a result of prayer. My father, who had before me 3 daughters, who was himself, by the standards of that time, a fairly educated man, known for his brilliance of mind, had unfortunately succumbed to the wiles of this world, to alcoholism, that had put his marriage in a state of being estranged, and actually lost his mind, literally, and was so sick with palpitations, thin as a bone. And he says to me one time he passed out when he was coming back from wherever, and an old woman who was uneducated said, if this is what education gives, then I don't want it. Yeah. The result of which was that he went to what today we call amagqirha, perhaps in Zulu Izangoma, yes, to try and sort out the issues that he had, because he had been politicized and I suspect was an atheist because of his political education that led him to believe that this concept of God is just a fallacy brought by white people. Yeah. His life had taken a downturn from being a thriving person to being brought down to the knees. And one day, he made a prayer of an unbeliever to God.
Wow.
And said, God, I don't think you brought me to this earth only for me to suffer like this. Save me.
Sure. Is that informing your name? Because your name is Cindy. So
I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
And that very afternoon, his brother came to collect him. He went to visit him, but he came to collect him from the Sangoma, and he discharged himself from the choir of the Sangoma. Less about him and what I believe, and he also accepts as demonic forces that were behind that. Let's leave that. So he gets home. At the time they were staying in Norwood, in Umtata, a suburb at the time, in that place, which was a mixed race of black, coloreds, and white people.
Yeah.
And women, I suspect 3 if not 4, came to him at the request of my mother to pray for him, for he was sick. He could hardly drink from a beer bottle. What? He could not get to his mouth because he was shaking. And then the women asked him, no man, no deacon, no elder, no pastor, women asked him, may we lay hands upon you so you may receive your healing? And he obliged. And as they laid hands upon her and called the name of Jesus,
yes,
he says he felt as if something came out like air from his ears. And from that moment, he began to recover and became healed in so many times, not so long from there. From that moment, he went to the revival meeting. He received Christ many times until they told him, it's enough now. And then, less than 10 years later, the very man that was almost a pauper, estranged with his wife, who was sickly, the Lord blessed him, and he became voted Black Businessman of the Year.
Wow.
In South Africa.
What year was this?
This is 1980 when he gets this award.
Sure.
This is a man written off. This is a man that even uneducated people said, if this is what education can do, I don't want it. This is a man whose friends probably left him. This is a man who doctors could not help. This is a man which Sangamos could not assist. But the power of Jesus Christ, exercised by women at it, laying hands upon him and calling upon the name of Jesus, he got healed miraculously till today. Now I'm saying to you, that's where I come from now. When he had seen the power of what this gospel can do, he then discussed with his wife. He says, I'm going to make a prayer to God. Let's make a prayer to God. If this God can deliver me from this, surely after 3 attempts at children and getting daughters alone, I have been wanting a son, and you know this very well. Let's go put a prayer request in church so that we may get a son. And by faith, he approached the congregation. By faith, the congregation joined with him. And by faith, I was born. And when he received the call, he tells me, at 7:30 in the evening on a Friday evening, the 10th of March, he was looking at the Bible, studying the Word, and he was on the book of John. And he said, his name shall be John.
Glory.
And then came the second name, his name shall be Sindiso. And then he gave me a third name, his name shall be Mda. Mda means this is the borderline that separates my years of darkness from my years of light. And this is where I come from. I come from a covenantal prayer.
Wow.
And I grew up in a household of believers. I never knew anything except Christianity. I understood that church was every day, literally. Sometimes 2 or 3 services in one day. 24/7, we went to pray. If I was sick and I said, I'm sick today, I don't want to go to church, my mom would say, wow, siya kwamphilisi ke ngoku. Kwamphilisi kulapho uzawuphila khona.
Yes, sir.
So being sick first became no excuse to go not to go to church. If you said that you did not wash your clothes, they are dirty, my mom would say, the Lord is looking for your soul, not how you look. So there were no reasons. And what's worse is that there are house churches that planted many of the assemblies that the Lord led my parents to assist to plant were happening at my house. The greatest preachers, from your Reverend Tolombile, from your Reverend Pina, from your Reverend Sondishi, from Reverend Nicholas Bengu himself, spent some days at our home where we were staying with him. He prayed with us. He blessed us. He took time to minister with us. And you can count, there is very few ministers that served in the executive of the 70s, 80s, 90s that never came to our house. Amongst the last to meet in our house when I was still living at home was Pastor Nicholas Musupi, who really came around and refreshed my understanding of what ministry could be. Just because of the posture you took, just because of the ability to say, yes, I'm saved, yes, I live a clean life, but I am educated, I am going to address you from every element that it needs to be addressed so that I can get you the gospel, and was able to get us deeper into the gospel. It was a wonderful journey, but I resisted with everything I had to be saved.
What informed the resistance? Was it because of attitude or you were young? 2
things in the main. The first one was, we were very scared generally as the children of brethren, what we call amakundwan, to accept salvation. Some few did, but the general body of us were afraid. And the reason we were afraid, the bar had been set so high of spirituality and holiness that if you dare take this route, you must understand that it comes with sacrifices. Now, funeka singajoli, funeka singatshontshe, funeka singathuki. And the whole people that are around us are doing these things. So you've got to live this type of life that is so different from everybody else. The extent to which you could be confused and be tempted to be someone oipar. So now we think, I'm fun by par. Now the second thing that for me in particular was a problem was that most of the brethren, at least in my area where I came from, were lousy dressers, to be frank. Absolutely no fashion sense.
Yeah.
They were very comfortable with mediocrity from where I was sitting. They didn't care whether they were wearing a T-shirt written "Jesus Saves" and that T-shirt is rugged. Because what they care about is that they are promoting a message. And these are people that I knew had good, decent shirts. But they would swap their shirts for this. So I thought about it. Do I want to be part of this? I thought, this does not represent who. I thought I was a bit ambitious.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a bit literate. I wanted to be a bit educated. I wanted to achieve a lot of things. Yes, my dad was a successful businessman by the standards of that area. I was not interested to do the actual business. What I wanted to do is become a lawyer. From the time I was doing grade 10, I think, it has become clear. And they told me this narrative that lawyers can't be saved.
What informed that?
Because they say lawyers are liars. That's the narrative
Is there any truth in that?
That is the narrative that the whole secular world holds. As a matter of fact, I think nothing could be further from the truth. What lawyers do is know how to interpret the law and apply it against any circumstances. And they know how to answer without being caught out. Now, because they do that, they are called liars. Yeah. Now, if you practice criminal law in particular, you are going to be called out in that area a lot.
And which law did you do? What was your area?
I began as a prosecutor for the state, where I prosecuted criminals and convicted them. I had an extremely high success rate. The extent to which when I switched sides to private practice to become a defense attorney, I had a following because of my conviction rate that made it easy for me to start. And I now took them out. I took them out in droves. At one point, I would say, I can walk on water. In other words, I would come to a dead case and take someone out miraculously, and they would be left not knowing. Until I watched a movie called Devil's Advocate. And I saw that this guy was taking out people, and there was a certain spirit which was evil behind him. And I began to wonder, could I be having that spirit? Because some of my successes, I can't explain myself. And I decided, no, I'm leaving this thing. I can't do this. And then I switched into commercial and corporate law, where I majored on transactions and mergers and acquisitions and government advisory services. But in the first year of my doing private practice, I was introduced by Advocate Uncensored senior counsel. He is now one of the 11 judges of Africa in the African court. And he spent time with me. We were talking about what we call the unfinished business of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that had been established by President Mandela. And that unfinished business was saying so many things went out about there. And people went in there. And as they went in there to confess their sins of apartheid, they were given immunity from criminal prosecution or civil liability. And we saw this as a grave, grave, grave injustice, because some came but were not granted immunity, yet were roaming free. And people had lost loved ones at the hands of these people. And we studied the case and we juxtaposed it with the Holocaust cases. And we said, why is Africa not getting justice? Because every other nation that has been dealt with in this manner was able to go through courts of the land and get justice, and there were reparations. There was a grouping called Kulumani that had organized itself as a support group for victims of apartheid, which also later would announce the class action lawsuit. And we teamed up with Ed Fagan from the American judiciary system, who was known as part of the lawyers that had been successful against big corporations on the Holocaust cases. And we formulated our own case here in South Africa. And on the 16th of June, 2002, I stood in Zurich, in Switzerland, with Ed Fagan. as Advocate Ngcebetsha, whom we affectionately called Brady, sat with a team this side. My first client at the time was Mrs. Dorothy Molife, the mother of the late young boy that is on these big portraits of June 16, Hector Peterson. I had as one of my clients the wife of the stalwart and the founder of the Pan-Africanist Congress, Mrs. Veronica Sobukwe. I had one of the people that were in the Mrs. Goniwe as one of Matthew Goniwe's wife. I had a number of well-known people. I met several people with serious political stature. And what was driving us was the zeal to find justice for these people. And President Mbeki had to make in his State of the Nation address, SONA, a remark regarding our cases, coming very strongly against them. And I had to be asked by the media to respond to him. And I said, with respect to the president, I respectfully disagree. This is justice for the victims of apartheid. What did we want to achieve? We wanted a victims fund, a reparations fund that would undo some of the legacy that apartheid has done from the time it was there in 1948 to where we were. Because without economic emancipation, our freedom, dare we say, is muted. Correct. And we were saying, it can't be right. There are people that were responsible that put together some of these systems. Many of our atrocities committed by the apartheid government had little to do with the actual political actors than they did with the economic interests that influenced the politicians to act in a particular way. And they took maximum advantage, so they aided and abetted the sustainability of apartheid to the destruction of many people, killing of people, torture of many people, expatriation of other people beyond the border. So we had this zeal to do something about it. When I was in Zurich, I met so many media. I actually had a toi-toi against us. Old white people who were stockbrokers, old white people that were holding stocks in the major banks that were saying that you are coming here to deprive us of our wealth by launching these cases. When I reached New York, where the case we had launched was in, we were surprised when I was invited to literally speak to every media network that the world knows and recognizes, from your CBN to your CNN, to your Sky News, to your SABC. I became a public figure in a matter of weeks. And I thank God for Advocate Ngcebetsha, who worked with me to say, John, you can do this. John, you can do this. This is how you answer. This is how you deal with it. And we learned with that. Of course, Ed Fagan and the team from America did likewise. But I became the official voice of the case. And I became the official engaging partner with government, with political parties in parliament and all of those things, and with society at large. So from those humble beginnings, it began to put us into a map where we were dealing with matters at a global level. I sat one time in a meeting of about 35 people arranged by RMB brokers. And in this meeting, they told me that not one of the people you see here is worth less than R1 billion. Sure. And all they wanted to know, what was the case about? What do you want to achieve? What will you do? These people had prepared their checkbooks to respond to one of the recommendations of the TRC. And that recommendation was saying, let there be a wealth tax that will be charged and levied against some of, if not all, the JSE-listed companies to contribute to a president fund that must respond to this issue. Regrettably, our government did not honor that, and we had no choice but to pursue it legally. It is a matter that maybe one day we will return to, but it is a matter worth pursuing because the African now looks as if he is not favored by God. Every other nation that has suffered the same fate has been paid a little amount, and there was a fund to repatriate, or at least do reparations in that regard. So that's where we come from the legal space. In that era, thriving, making headlines, being in the major newspapers, and all of that. I am, on the other hand, someone that was in the pews every Sunday, except if I was not at church. I became a devout Christian. I will tell you how I got there. But before we go there, President, allow me to tell you a little bit as I conclude this part of my story, how I became even to do law. I'm in varsity. I'm concluding my first degree. And I'm not saved. I'm resisting this thing with everything I have.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of those 2 points I told you about. I said,
which institution did you
I was in the University of Transkei, which is now called Walter Sisulu University.
Okay.
We had, by the grace of God, I believe, one of the best legal minds to give us lectures and professors, and we were really privileged. In fact, the legal fraternity in South Africa has so many talent that came from that university.
Yeah.
Many have served in the Constitutional Court as judges, some as judge presidents of various divisions, some as sterling lawyers, one of which is Advocate Ngcebetsha. So we were privileged in that era. That is just prior to democracy. And these guys had just come back from exile from different parts of the world, and they were giving everything with passion back, as if this was now their new terrain of struggle, to make sure that this African we've been fighting for now can be able to stand up and be ready for the war. So we were beneficiaries of that. But my personal story in varsity is that then my girlfriend at the time falls pregnant as she's doing her last year degree. Unfortunately, we didn't agree about the pregnancy, so I accepted it, as she put it, as an accident. Then she left. As she left.
Was that prior, before you got saved?
I'm not saved at this point. I don't have plans actually to be saved. I'm still waiting until I can have stability in my life before I can think about this matter of salvation.
Yeah.
And then later, she delivers, and we have a child, my firstborn, a son I love very much, Ndandu. And then as she leaves Umtata, because she was not from Umtata, of course what happens is, she asked what is going to happen now about our relationship. I said, I don't believe in long-distance relationships, so it's fine, we'll concentrate on the child. So continue with your life, and I'll continue with mine. And we did that. 2 years or so later, we met again. And we thought, let's rekindle our romance.
Yes.
And as we did that, first time we spent time together, a couple of days after we had spent the weekend together, she told me, you know what, I'm pregnant again.
Again?
So what? Oh, okay.
Sure.
So what are we going to do now? Of course, I'll try and cut a lot of other things that are not necessary. So I had 2 children before I got married. That's my story. That's my reality.
So when you came back together, when you wanted to rekindle the relationship, were you now planning on marrying her and then building a family together?
No. We didn't even talk about that.
There was no conversation about that?
Absolutely none. We're just living life. We were just going along with the flow. We were just being boys, and we were just doing what we could. We were beginning to work now, get a little bit of money, do things for ourselves. My father is very strict. He says, I never pregnanted any woman, so go get money to pay for damages. This family is a family of values. You're not going to pregnant any woman and not pay damages. I'm not going to give you a cent. You're going to pay every cent. It is your damage. I am your father to make sure you do the right thing, and I did the right thing. And of course, the reality is that I have been taught, and I grew up in a very tight family that shared values about fatherhood and the bond between father and son and children. And the greatest desire I had was to make sure that, if anything, I could at least participate in my son's upbringing, bring in my own value set and all of that. And as soon as it became clear that I had no intentions to get married in my firstborn, then I was told I'll be denied every opportunity that I could meet with my son, not even to see him. In fact, on this one occasion, I almost got a whipping with a whip because I tried, with the assistance of the mother of my child, to meet with my son just to see him. So when the second pregnancy was announced, it became clear to me that I'm going to have 2 children, boys at it, that are going to grow up without the benefit of knowing me, let alone having some of my values shared with them. So I said to my dad, Daddy, we're here now, and I can't take the pain of not having my children. I was about 23, going 24 at the time. And I said, if it means that I must get married in order to get that access, that's what a sacrifice I'm prepared to pay. That's a cost I'm ready to pay. And the mother of my children was indeed a very high-ranking priest in one of the mainline churches. And quickly, whilst my son was my second son, we were expecting, there was a night wedding that was quickly arranged at their parish, and a few people that could come, and we got married.
And you were doing this so that you can gain access to your children?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you understood that the divide is going to cause more harm.
It was too much for me to bear. In any event, we got married, and I moved to Johannesburg where she was staying. I got a place where we would stay in the northern suburbs. In no time, we got our own house, and life began. Now, I'm trained. I'm indoctrinated, not just from scripture, but from my own family set of values, that divorce is not an option once we get married. Correct. So that's the mindset I went into this with, that there's no way I'm going to get divorced, no matter how or why I got into this. It was it for me. But as soon as I entered into it, there were trouble, there were challenges.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest challenges in life is when you are in denial about something. And to leapfrog forward, I then got saved. I accepted Christ. I was now in the Katlehong Assembly under the leadership of Pastor Nicholas Msupi, who I had met at home some many years ago. And whilst we were there, I began to serve a few years later in the church, first in the deacon's quarters. And the year 2000 became a very difficult year for us in Katlehong. A man that inspired us, not only us as the Katlehong Church, but across Southern Africa, if not the world, who had been quite close to me, mentoring me on understanding, because I had this zeal to understand scriptures even the more. Notwithstanding my challenges domestically, I had discovered a zeal to serve the Lord as much as I could. And what then followed was that he died in a car accident.
Sure.
And as he died, our church was full of young people. The elders of that church, a very good man of God, great character. I've never seen selfless leaders like those. Tatu Macheke, Tatu Mashinini, Tatu Ngcebetsha, who is now pastor and regional head of the Assemblies of God, Back to God section in Eastern Reef. He was the secretary of the elders. There was Tatu Masiteng. There was Tatu Mtetwa. And there was Tatu Ulanga, the old man. As I began to start serving, he was retiring because of old age. Now, Tatu Langa is the father to Pastor Abraham Langa, the teaching team member in the Back to God section. So these men wrote me in. Yes. As Nick Msupi died, they called me aside and they said, we need you as a bridge between us and the youth. And because they are inspired by you for whatever reason, we are going to teach you. Come in here and serve as one of us in the elders. Now, I was caught by complete surprise.
And how old were you when you were called to serve?
This was 28, 29, close to being 30, somewhere there. And I began to serve. Before I knew it, a couple of years later, the responsibility to chair the meetings was left to me. The one that normally would chair meetings would be Pastor Msomi, who I affectionately call Butseth. He mentored me. In fact, I remember when the teaching team came to make elections for deacons and elders, I had expressed myself to the leadership, I'm not going to make myself available. And he's the one person that persuaded me. And he said to me, leadership is about influence. Influence out of position is as good as not possible.
Sure.
You got to take the position for your influence to be impeccable.
Did you have those particular ambitions? Because when you are telling us about your journey, you've also started with your family. I mean, as far as growing up, being Cindy, so you were saved, and then there were those principles and values. And then as you grew up, you were witnessing just different ministers coming in on board, and you were just seeing them serving. Did you have that zeal as you were growing up, or that imagination that one day I am going to be as Reverend Nicholas Bengo?
You know, I mean, President, I'll tell you the truth. In one time, yes. In another time, no. Most of the time, no. But I do remember the episode. Pastor Stephen Musehla, the grandfather to Pamela Chabalala, who fellowships with us here, and her mom, Mapule, came to our home, spent about 2 or 3 weeks, dispatched by Pastor Bengu, or rather Reverend Bengu, to come and do teachings in our home assembly in Ngcele. And he was joined by Reverend Sondishi from Umdanzane. And then they spent time there. I still remember the message that was principally preached by Reverend Sondish. Barnabas. The whole time he was there, he was telling us about Barnabas. And then when the time came for elections of elders and deacons, I was still in Sunday school. I went to ask my dad that I think they must also do elections in the Sunday school class for elders and deacons, for I thought I could be an elder there.
When you were still in Sunday school?
That's as far as my ambitions went. But for anything else, the further I was, the better. So I liked to sit at the back. But the very interesting thing was that I listened to the sermons. I don't know why. I listened sometimes. I would sleep, more so when Bengu preached.
Yeah.
Because most of the time he preached in our era. He told a lot of stories, laughed a lot, and taught songs during the time of the sermon. He would have come back from America from this trip. He's telling us about this. He's telling us about this. And I'm tired. I'm bored. I just sleep. It's been a long service. It was not unfamiliar to have a 5 or 6 hour service. So it's okay. And he's there. He's going to take his time. Maybe it'll take 2 hours. And before I know it, everybody was like last year. When I wake up, the house is on fire.
Sure.
The man, uyabhodla ngathi kubhodla ibhubesi. And the Holy Ghost is just all over the show. I said, what type of a man is this? In all my life, I've seen many ministers. I have never seen, at least for me, a man that carried the unction of God like that man did.
Sure.
I have never witnessed this with anybody. But this is what we witnessed. When we see the work today and the state of the church, globally, in South Africa, and my own beloved church, Back to God section in Assemblies of God, and the church in Assemblies of God in general, and you have a sense of what you witnessed in the 70s and the 80s, it's chalk and cheese.
Sure.
The sheer power of the Holy Ghost move, the miracles, The people prayed for and they jump out of wheelchairs. No gimmick, no fake. People that we knew for years were like that. The healing miraculously of people. The praying of things that come to life, not with even laying of hands of a congregational prayer of accord, one accord.
Sure.
The might that uneducated men of God delivered with utmost reverence for all of us, including those that were literate and in high positions. Being a minister was not something anyone wanted to do. It was something that it was clear in society that one is called. As a matter of fact, let me explain to you people something that they don't know. One of the reasons Reverend Bengu, who we take from, refused to take a collar was not because he was never indoctrinated with collars. He actually came from the Lutheran church. Okay. His father was a priest there. And they do use the tunics you use and the collars. He said, we must distinguish ourselves by the presence of God in us that shows us separate and apart as men and women of God. Sure. It is not the uniform that should show you who you are. That's why he refused his church to even have a uniform when he could have made millions as a fundraising scheme through uniforms. He said, no. Your uniform should be love. You should be known that this is a congregation of the living God, that you can see through how they love each other and care for each other, that these are people and children of God, not by uniform. Wow. Because uniform, you can take it off, then what is remaining? So I'm saying to you, Fred Shabalala, Pastor Fred Shabalala, what a loyal servant for most of the part that we knew of the Back to God crusades. Mm-hmm. I met Pastor Philip Msuiza, Pastor Ishmael Beche. All of these great people came and ministered in our villages, in our homes, and they did wondrous works of God. In the process, certain impartations happened, consciously or subconsciously. I remember a conversation between my father and one man who was an evangelist called Brother Punan. And they were having a conversation about me. And this name of mine always gave me problems. And they asked me the question, Brother Punana, what was very problematic. Yeah. And I know, I mean, I'm not about to be saved. So I can't answer this because when I answer it, it looks like I'm being irresponsible when I say I don't want to be saved. When I answer it positively, I'll be lying and I don't want to lie because I can't lie. Anyway, and they were having a conversation about me, with me. And they say, he's tall like Bengu. He will be another Bengu. And they began to speak over my life. Reluctantly, I overheard and accepted, but I could not say no. But deep down on myself, I said, I don't want the life of Bengu. That one, that buried his child with a suitcase on the way to a revival. Is that what I want for myself? No, certainly not. I've got big plans. That's why I call it an unfamiliar call. It came in an unfamiliar way. I'll talk about that later. Mm-hmm. It came completely unexpected. It came and I wanted to fight it with everything I had. I even committed serious, grave mistakes in my effort to fight. Anyway, where were we, President? We were on the question of saying that I then accepted salvation. I served in the church. Pastor Nick Musupi dies. As a matter of fact, when I met Brother Abner Mariri, who I'll speak more about later, it was when Nick Musupi was being driven around by him and he introduced the two of us. Till today, we know each other. Since then, in the late 90s. Then we went ahead with work. We were doing our lawyer work. I was developing my family. I was trying my best to live out for Christ. Mistakes happened there, but that was nothing major. I was on this course. And then in the year, I think 2005, no, before then, in the year 2003, there was a conference at Mangosuthu College of Back to God. My first introduction to Back to God conferences. What a shocker for me.
What shocked you?
I was sitting in the gallery in an auditorium. half interested in what's happening, but keen to learn what's happening. But, I must take notes and report back to my congregation in Katlehong. And then, Pastor, let me say, the chairman of Back to God Crusade at the time was suspended by conference. Pastor V.F. Shabala. This was arising from a PricewaterhouseCoopers audit firm report of maladministration and some misdemeanors. There was a committee at the time that had been elected by conference called the Remuneration Task Team, abbreviated to be called the RTT. And guess who was the chairman of that committee? None other than your current Reverend Jerome Kuom.
Oh.
And guess who was part of the committee? None other than our dear beloved brother, may his soul rest in peace, the late Hosea Ratsiful. And many others, Mveli Diko and others. And they were more like the EFF within the structures of the movement, or the infamous Youth League up to the 2008-7 conference of Puluwan. And they were gunning for, let's put that aside, in any event. They tabled the report, and the report with its recommendations, and what we then had was a situation where the executive at the time laid ably by a very wise man who I had privileged to work very closely with, Reverend I.D. Hleta, the uncle to the past chairman of the former chairman of the Back to God, Osborne, Dr. Osborne Hleta. And in that conference, what struck me the most was that he was suspended in the afternoon session by announcement of the chairman with the concurrence of conference. We went into the evening service session, which was devotions. I went to the hotel to sleep. I woke up in the morning. I came in after the morning devotions to enter into the formal deliberations. 10 o'clock in schedule. He was suspended in the afternoon. At 10 o'clock the following morning, the schedule was that Back to God was to deliver reports. And as chairman, he would have been expected. But now he's suspended. You know what happened at 10 o'clock? He stood there at 10 o'clock and delivered a message for an hour.
Whilst he was suspended?
Yes, he preached as if he was never suspended. When he finished, he prayed. I can't remember whether he prayed, but when he concluded his sermon, he then told conference that, Naleyo suspension yenangi accept. And that was it. What?
Were there any merits in that, of that act? Because it will seem to maybe an untrained eye or someone who does not know as much, that, okay, is this then not an act of rebellion, that you are not accepting the suspension that is coming from the people of whom you report to?
The golden rule, President, of leadership is not whether or not there are merits. There may well be merits, there may well be no merits. The golden rule is to abide to leadership if you want to be known as a leader. And then contest your things within structures if you must. And we'll speak about this a bit later, even with my personal experiences. Yeah. And what happened in this situation is that I came back very distraught. What is this? Remember, next to Bengu, Fred Shabalala was the idol of the young people. After all, this is the man that dared in 1985 to come out with a poem. He's the first man I heard preach in English and twang like an American. I mean, he dressed well. He was our inspiration as young people. So for me personally, and many young people, he was our hero. Now he's made all sorts of allegations and he's being suspended. So obviously the default mind is going to tell you this is not true, but this is PricewaterhouseCoopers that is making this report that recommend this action. And the executive is adopting it. What are you going to say about it? And I says, nah, I'm not going to do that. You know what happens then?
What happened?
I'm far removed from this thing. I know that tomorrow I'm just going home. This is it for me. I'm going to call my dad and my mom and ask, what is this now? And I get home. Before I know it, I get a call from Guam. Hey, Limakwa. Now, in the evening, probably around 8 p.m., comes Pastor Musehla, probably Pastor Msiza, I can't remember. I remember Pastor Musehla vividly. But I do know the actors at that period, Pastor Musehla, Pastor Majia, Pastor Msiza would come from time to time. But these two, Majia and Musehla, then decide that something must be done. And I was convinced, with Guam being present, of course, and some of the RTT members, like Mveli Tiko, that we are here to appoint you as our lawyer. Help us.
Sure.
Now I must go and act against my heroes of faith.
So they want you to help them in what matter?
I must make an intervention and bring order, remove Shabalala, and effect his suspension.
Sure.
How do I do that? So I think I'm going to use my diplomacy, reach out to him, call upon him as a father. Now he's got these Jewish lawyers that are so adamant and arrogant. So I say, okay, let's go to court and get this thing sorted. Cutting a long story short, I had to go to court to get rid of him so that the church could function and bring back to order. The conference, amongst other things, had discovered for the first time, unbeknown to many of the executive members, that there were at least 11 or 13 accounts that were unknown to the church that had money, millions. And there may well have been a good reason, but more importantly, the Scorpions at the time had reached out to me once they knew I was involved in the case to say they've got an order to come in and arrest. I pleaded with everything I had. I said, no. You can't come in. Allow me to sort this mess out. Why? An arrest of Fred Shabalala would have been an arrest of the entire Assemblies of God. And I could not allow that. Because once he was arrested, he was going to be all over the papers as headlines. And who's the greatest loser there? It's not him. It's not his family. It's the brand AoG. It's the brand BTG. Back to God. And I felt I must do everything I had. And by the grace of God, I was able to appeal. Thanks to my other profile I had now gained through my other efforts elsewhere, they could listen to me and accept that this is an internal matter that we will solve with time. Solve it, we did.
Sure.
By the grace of God. Now, what followed was that I then sat in almost each and every executive meeting of the Assemblies of God, back to God, for at least 5 to 6 years. Because now everything had turned legal. Because there is...
So you were needed there because of
my legal...
Yes.
Yeah, because everything could be legal. If we needed to discipline somebody, they needed to check whether they are loopholes constitutionally, lawfully, and all of these things, and they always wanted me to be there. If there were utterances or circulars to be sent that could be portrayed to be damaging the repute of others, we needed to make sure that there's a fine eye to look at whether anything that went was with my hand, or at least with my ability to oversee and advise.
But then when you are talking about that and you are sitting there for consecutive years, when they are sitting down, there is an element that it exposes you to a different part of leadership. Because, for instance, as congregants, we would see somebody who is just preaching and then he ends there. But then you were exposed to also the background, the mess which is behind. What informed your loyalty to BTG AoG? Why couldn't you just come as a consultant, knowing what you knew, most probably some personal things about them and other allegations that are...
No, one of the things you must appreciate is that, number one, if it had not been, and I say this as a matter of a statement of fact and conviction. If it had not been for the work that Bengu started, which was the Back to God crusade, and eventually the churches he planted, the brethren that ministered to my mother first, who accepted salvation and upon conviction went and ministered to my father, would have never probably reached through my family. I would probably not be born, because that could have been the end of my life. So for me, there's an unbroken umbilical cord with the Back to God crusade, with the Back to God section of the work, with the Assemblies of God. There is nothing you can do about it. Number two, my own salvation was through the same institution.
Correct. Yeah.
And how God blessed me was through, I do believe, the source that came through God through this institution. Now, the fact that it was suffering from problems didn't mean that it was wrong. It just needed to root out certain elements that needed to be solved. And they too did not need to be thrown away for good. If we have enough time to cover this thing, I will also tell you that I was the first one to ask the executive, bring back Fred Shabalala to ministry. Because when we disciplined him, it was never to kill him. Yeah. And I was really glad when they listened to my advice and they followed through, and he was brought back, and he died having done his part for the ministry of the work. I regard him as a father, even now. Even with that blemish, which all of us have, only his was more put on the. I tell you, there are very few people that you can ever compare with that man. He was a visionary. He made things happen. He grew the Back to God. After Bengu left, he was the pillar of the work. And you can never take that away from him. And therefore, we must never throw the baby with the water. But anyway, I learned a lot of things in my journey with Back to God. My loyalty there is undying. Even though that is my position, the truth is when God revealed what work we must do, it became clear it would not be under the direct auspices of Back to God. Though my preference remains that it should have been with their cooperation. Because now I am sent from my home to a new house to establish. What does that mean? My parents stay in East London. That's my parents' home. If anything goes wrong there, I'm going to run and sort it out with all power I have. I'll go and support any day, but that's not where I stay. I am called to be in Johannesburg. I have my own home here in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg. That's my home. I have my own house. I've got my own family. I've got my own kids. I've got my own wife. So my first preference is there. But any day they need me at home, they know I'm just one call away. So that's the same relationship I have. It will never change. Anytime any one of the leaders want to talk to me, they will talk to me. But we'll navigate those things a bit later. The fact of the matter, though, is that I got a chance. Lastly, for tonight, I think, then I was then trusted with new responsibility. Now I had removed those people that needed to be removed in the system. Now I was in a situation where we needed to cure the root causes of what had happened. And in curing the root causes of what had happened, it needed a remodeling of the whole AoG Back to God section. We needed to re-corporatize where we needed to do. We needed to enhance corporate governance. We needed to deal with the issues of the constitution and amend it. And part of what we were looking at is those things. So I said, I can't do this. I'm a lawyer. I can't do this. This is the work of God. I can't do this. No lawyer can dictate in legal terms what should happen. I said, the only precondition is my modest request to you. At least give me a group of any elder in ministry that walked with Bengu the visionary, that can share with me exactly what it is that was his heartbeat for the work. For I never wanted to interfere with his vision. I never wanted to interfere with what work he had started. All I could do was to improve what it is that was their governance. I said, won't you give me that? By the grace of God, they said yes. For 2 to 3 weeks, I had sat in my office aside time to meet with different leaders that had been in the executive with Bengu, that had been in the teaching team he had formulated, that had been in the various structures of leadership and ministry. And they shared with me deeper insights of the man and what vision he carried. And then they exposed me to many of his recordings, most of which were cassettes, backdated to a long, long time ago, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, seculars that he sent, proformas that he had developed for autonomous churches, how they should be designed. And I was privileged to sit for many days with Pastor Josiah Donda, who many had referred to as a result of Bengu's naming as the Black Englishman. For a different day, we will talk about what that meant. And he would say to me, is it still the Assemblies of God? Or has it become the shambles of God?
Sure.
So, very interesting.
I would like us to maybe just double click on that one, especially when it comes to your interaction with the people who are working close with Bengu. I just want to remind also our listeners and our viewers online that, remember, you are also part of the conversation. Please feel free on the comment section, post your question that you'd like us to ask before we conclude this conversation. Apostle, back to you. In as far as the recordings that you have listened to and the modus operandi of Bengu, what has he envisioned for Back to God?
Look, I want to be tactical there. I don't want to usurp the authority of the leaders in the hierarchy of the church to speak about that. But I will share my experience in as far as what I learned out of that and be able on what could be deemed public to deal with those.
Okay.
However, here's what happened. I met with Josiah Donda, the old man. I met with Pastor Victor Ngomonde, who, after a series of engagements with him, I then said to him, you permanently damaged my understanding of church. And I think if there is any one pastor in those interviews who really had a lasting impression and impact in my life, it was him. More about that later. However, I remember meeting with Pastor Ngcebetsha, who was a member of the executive, also of the teaching team. And because he recognized that I was talking to many people, taking notes, listening to this, getting insights, he says to me, listen to here, my boy. Now, Pastor Ngcebetsha is fairly close to my dad in one way or the other. They are more or less the same age, and they come from the same area of Transkei. And then he felt that this young lawyer, I think, is thrown into the deep with this assignment. This is something that needed a more seasoned lawyer with great maturity. He says to me, he calls me aside, he says, listen to me. You can listen to all of us. We will tell you many things, but there's one man I want you to listen to. And if I say something, or any one of us says something that is against what he says, take his view as right. I say, what do you mean? Who's that? He says, Pastor Ngomonde. I say, why? He say, we were young boys, zealous for the Lord. In 1966, in Natalspruit, now called Katlehong, Bengu was busy ministering from the front. And he said, who shall I leave this thing to? And he cried out loud, who shall I leave this thing to? And there were great men of God that we revered and respected, who were seniors, who were eager for it to be thrown at them and were almost volunteering their availability and credentials. And he went on a rant And Gomonde and I, as he puts it, are sitting with others as juniors right at the back. And we are so much uninterested in this because we know there's no way he could be talking to any of us who are youth. As I understand Pastor Gomonde's age, at that time he was probably 28 or something like that. And then he says, ultimately, Bengu says, oh, Mandla. Where is Mandla? And then Gomonde could not recognize that he's the one being called. And then ultimately he sees that he's being one called. And he says what we saw that day was a serious impartation and passing of the baton from the Apostle Bengu to Mandla, the young man Gomonde. And any one of us who's ready to be truthful will tell you what that meant and what significance it has. And he says, therefore, you can listen to all of us, but the man you should pay attention to is this one. It didn't take time for me when I spoke to him to realize why he said what he said. And I had the privilege to meet I.D. Hleta. I had the privilege to meet, the list is countless, and I compiled a report for conference. And in this report, I entitled it, Maibui, which means, let it come back. And in my introductory remarks, after acknowledging those that helped me to formulate a view, I then said, I have discovered that we are off rails. May we bring it back. Part of me saying, let us bring it back, was to resuscitate a dormant teaching team ministry by elevating its significance arising from what I had learned. That the church, as was founded by Bengu, should be led principally by the apostolic leadership of the Back to God teaching team, which he appointed the first 24 himself and gave mandate for them to bear new Timothys to grow the work, and the executive that would serve from time to time by way of election, principally for administration and financial. So there's the apostolic and there's the administrative. When I presented, I remember Pastor Mandla Gunene remarked, what? At conference. He says, what? So we have national elders and national deacons, to which he received sharp rebuke. How can you call the executive our fathers national deacons? I don't know if he was far from the truth, but I think he was interpreting it with a local church mentality. The fact of the matter is that I thought I was offering legal services. I thought I was busy understanding so I can improve my legal prowess. I was being trained. I was being inducted. I was being imparted for something greater the Lord had in mind for me in ministry. I think let's stop there for now.
Wow. That's very very great. But before we are to move from that point, do you think that now is the Back to God back on its rails as you have left it? Did they follow the recommendations that you guys have presented? In as much as you were trying to build it, it was building you at the very same time.
Look,
what do you think is the state of the church?
I'm very careful to make comments about the Back to God, especially on a public platform. So I will have to exercise a bit of restraint where it is necessary. My take is that what we are saying may be informative but must build. And if I say things that are right in a wrong platform, it could be problematic. I've been privileged to sit and talk to a number of leaders in the executive of the Back to God. I've been privileged even to sit and speak to the top 9 leadership of the current teaching team. The last of those meetings, as a matter of fact, with the teaching team leadership was as as recent as November last year, as you may recall, brethren will learn about this as we go. It is post my disassociation from the Assemblies of God and the Back to God, which for the record, the teaching team says they had no part to play with. That's a conversation for later. The fact of the matter is that it's very important to recognize Back to God as our home.
Yes.
It's very important to understand that the slogan of Assemblies of God says bound in fellowship by the Spirit. It does not say bound in fellowship by the letter.
Yes.
So no letter can disassociate me from Back to God.
Yes, sir.
It is only the Spirit, in the Spirit of the living God, that knows how to do so, and He has not. I have a very thriving relationship with the leaders of Back to God. I have a thriving relationship with the ordinary congregants. I love them, and I do think they love me. And I think there's a bit of confusion about why this happened. I have some views why it happened. Those I will definitely share.
Yes. Before we get to that, may we then go to, I think I asked this initially. Thank you for the background. It was great and comprehensive. But then now, take us to the genesis of Sandton AoG, the revivals from Katlehong to the Blue Church to One Kombi Road.
Look, President, I can't talk to you about the genesis of 12 October 2014 without telling you that in the year, I think, 2009, 2008, somewhere there, when Dr. S.D. Gumbi was our pastor in Katlehong, I met with him to ask him to be relieved as the elder in the church. He declined. He would not even have it. I had my reasons for that. Then came Pastor Beche. I think after him, I followed through with a similar request, and I made very legitimate grounds. I'm busy, you can see I'm traveling, I'm out of the country all the time, I'm all over the country, and there's no time to always be at church. And with all my busy schedule, I never missed when I could be in Joburg, being at church in the Sunday morning. Neither would I miss a Monday prayer day. And I could not miss any meeting of leadership because I was now chairing the meetings of joint leadership of elders and deacons. Now, I was saying, it's too busy, I can't do this, so release me. But the real reason was not that. The real reason was that my marriage was collapsing. And it was not working. And I thought, what can I do to save the office I was serving in? Because I didn't want disrepute to fall onto it because of my personal issues. I remember I wrote a letter to the executive asking them to find another lawyer because I had now become the anchor lawyer for the Assemblies of God Back to God because I had been divorced. And they replied to say, we would have nothing of it. Your divorce has nothing to do with your legal skills you are providing. So we must rather just live with the situation as it was. Now, what happened is, my then wife then said to me, I'll never forget this, I was going to take my second born to boarding school. If I come back here, when I come back tomorrow, and you are still here, I'm going to pack up my clothes and leave. Because you know very well that we are busy with something that does not work. And I had to fathom the thought of a wife that packs clothes and leaves, and I'm living in the same house. I thought, So I picked up my bags, 2 of them, one big, one small, put them into my car, left the other cars, left a full house with all the furniture, and went where I did not know. Eventually found a place to sleep, and then I decided I'll see how it goes. Everybody tried their bit to save the marriage. From my pastor, who at this time was Pastor Lusunzi, who gave a report to the elders that only God can save this marriage. There's no marriage here. To my parents, who tried every trick in the book, to a teaching team member, this was now Pastor Butwa, who was the pastor of my father at Duncan Village in the Eastern Cape. He gave the same report. To independent professional counselor who were trained in this regard, who said, this is it. And we divorced. Now listen to me. After divorce, then one day of course my ex-wife left the church immediately when we had problems. And she never came back. She didn't want anything to do with Assemblies of God. She probably held the view that I was too popular in the movement, and therefore there would be bias. I suspect that was her thinking. In fact, I know for a fact that's what she thought. What then followed was this. About a year later, there was a woman that she used to be close to in the church who died, the wife of an elder. I was an elder too. And when she died, she came for the funeral after a long absence. And brethren were very happy to see her. And when they were happy to see her, they came and told her how much they are praying for us to reunite and reconcile. So she calls me a couple of days after this weekend. She says to me, can we meet for coffee? I need to speak about something important. And I obliged. We met in Sandton at one of the restaurants for lunch. And she tells me that, look, I was in Katlehong, as you know. Brethren, one after another, were saying this. I need you to understand what we both know. What is our truth? If it were not for the pregnancies of my two boys, you and I would have never married. And therefore, we mutually agreed to no longer get married. So I need you to tell the leadership and the pastor to tell the congregants to stop praying for us. I said, no, I can't do that. I can never do that. She said, then accept that I will have to ask myself, the pastor. I said, he's your pastor. You can say what you want to say to him. At the back of my mind, I think this is something that will never materialize anyway. Little did I know that she did. And then I got a call from Pastor Lusunzi, who said that she needs to do a meeting with me because this is what my ex-wife said to him she wants to do. And then he convened a meeting of elders one Tuesday evening, and I was called to this meeting. At that time, I'm still serving the excommunication for being divorced, which, by the way, I supported it be done. I've been disciplined 3 times in my life in the church, and every time I was disciplined, I actually asked that they do so. And I'll explain why. Anyway, I went there in that meeting. I sat there and listened. She tabled her request. John and I were married. We were married as a result of the fact that we had children. And we wanted to regularize that for the sake of the building of the children. The boys are old now. Please, we agreed to mutually separate. I ask you that you accept and tell your congregants not to pray for us again. 1. 2, please accept that he and I have agreed that each one of us are free to marry whoever else we want to marry. And if any one of you see any one of us with another partner, don't ask questions. I was stone shocked. But I was also aware that what she was saying was true. I was not sure whether that is something capable of being said in a church leadership meeting. Then brethren asked questions as leaders. They engaged on the matter, how best they could. It became clear that she had made up her mind. And then ultimately I was asked for review. I said, who are you asking? I'm suspended. I have no rights. I have limited rights on the matter. But let me tell you, because I've been in your leadership shoes, I would never dare make this announcement if I were you. That she's asking you to do. Even though I know the truth of what it is about. The meeting ended. Listen, Tuesday night. I do what I do. I travel. I think I went to Durban. I came back, took the flight that I could be at church in the morning. And as I entered the church, there was a long queue that always happens when you go to give offerings for free will. I enter at that time after announcements. And as I come back from offering, brethren are shaking my hand and pleading how sorry they were for me. I asked myself, what could have happened now? At the back of my mind, there was no chance that this announcement could be made. It turns out, Pastor Lusumzi, after praise and worship and before announcement stopped, the congregation said, "Whoa, I have a major announcement to make. You know John and his ex-wife were married. You know we announced that they were now divorced. I need to tell you now that the ex-wife came to me and said the following. She wants you to stop praying for her because she and John have agreed not to mutually separate. They've released each other from the bond of marriage. As a result, each one of them are free to marry by their agreement." And that was it. Now, that's why the brethren were busy being sorry for me, because I was shocked. In fact, I was hurt. I only understood the significance of that much, much later, what it meant. And President, the producers are telling that we are out of time.
Yes.
We must now take a pause and close. We'll continue on this perhaps later in the next week or so. You can look at what you need to look at, but this is where we are, and I think we've given what we can for today.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for tuning in at home. We are going to, I think next week when we are starting off, we are just going to be starting with the questions that you have posted, just to clarify them. There's still a lot of ground for us to touch into, because I mean, you can understand that we've just stopped here on divorce and then an allowance, the dissolution of the marriage, that you can remarry. We need to also just reconcile that with Scripture. Whether is it in line? You need to clarify, Apostle.
Absolutely.
That, whether we are going to
I'm more than ready to deal with that.
Yes, and then there's a lot that we're going to cover, including then our journey from 10 years ago up until this point. But thank you so much for tuning in at home. I guess we'll see them next week, Apostle. Is it?
We will see them soon. As to which day, I think those that are producing this for us will tell us what's the appropriate time, but it surely should be announced.
Fantastic. I just have this for you. Remember, we are celebrating our 10th year. We're having a gala dinner that is lined up on the 1st of November. If you haven't gotten your ticket as yet, please do comment. If you'd like to join us for our gala dinner, the information is going to be made available to you. Again, thank you so much, viewers at home, for tuning in, and God bless you. Good night.